Greetings and pleasant frights! Fellow travelers along the path of the beam, I am known on this level of the tower as Jaime and Fuego, and if it please you, join me here for a bit of palaver on Hail to Stephen King, my favorite author, as you see by that plentiful tower of books beyond me. Welcome to the horror show. I'm Jaime and Fuego, and thank you so very much, gracias, as I always say, for joining me here for, just continued coverage of Sai King El Rey, my favorite dude, my favorite author, and for additional anniversary coverage, the second part of our monthly read-along here on Hail to Stephen King. Shout out to the entire Hail to Stephen King Facebook group. Love y'all. This has been a fun bit of just covering the book, well, the collection of stories, I should say, that celebrated its 25th anniversary last month in September, and so I figured, well, for the month of October being so spooktacular and all, we should select 2 stories every single week, read them along together, and then you guys can comment about them below after you watch my thoughts. We can further talk about them, obviously, in the Facebook group and everything. So I am so very happy to have all of you here for the next 2 selections. Yeah, I'm doing my best John Kassir Crypt Keeper here, who we got to meet a couple years ago at Mad Monster, and that guy is down to earth, awesome, so very cool, and Tales from the Crypt being one of my absolute favorite shows, like ever. Anthology horror is my jam, y'all. It doesn't matter if you're watching it on the screen or if you're reading it, haha, like in this case, which obviously I encourage all of you constantly to read Stephen King on all of my 100+ episodes here. Just a little October reminder that a couple years ago for my personal channel in Fuegotainment, I did coverage of all 93 episodes of Tales from the Crypt. So I basically was like, okay, there's 31 months in October, 31 months, derps, there's 31 days in the month of October, and yes, there's 93 episodes of Tales from the Crypt, so I went 3 episodes at a time, 1 day at a time, and just gave my thoughts. That coverage is found here on the horror show. We have a special playlist for it, so if you want to see some of my thoughts and do a deep dive into one of my favorite series of all time, that is floating around here on the interwebs of our YouTube chisel. But yeah, anthology horror is really cool in the fact that when King does it in his short story capacity, he is very much of the Tales from the Crypt, the Twilight Zone ilk, where he is all about a twist, which, the Shamhammer has made himself notorious for until, he just kind of found his footing once again, a little bit with the Visit, and then much more so with The Amazing Split, which we just got our newest trailer for Glass about. But I love in the fact that King, with his silver lining that he always has in the predominance of his novels, except for like A Pet Cemetery, for instance, he goes for that twist, scary, effed up ending a lot of the time in his short story selections, which I think is really dope, and you can tell that he traces his influence back to, stuff like The Twilight Zone, which I still remember staying up all night, sleepover session with my best friend growing up, just, binging, because they would do these marathons where they would show, like, just for a whole day, nothing but Twilight Zone episodes. How to Serve Man still being my personal favorite, but there's so many amazing ones. I've been wanting to track down that 4th Dimension box set, which has like all of the different episodes from all the different iterations. So we're talking the original, we're talking the 80s revival, we're talking the So-So 2000s one, and now we have Jordan Peele getting ready to revive the property, which is pretty dope and stuff. And so for each of these weeks, I've tried to select 2 stories that kind of have correlations, whether it's tone or subject matter, whatever it may be. And how could you not pair together Popsy and the Night Flier, especially when in like the afterword and the notes and stuff like that, in Nightmares and Dreamscapes, King makes a very deliberate and distinctive correlation between the 2, that we just might have a character from one be a character in another. So I'm going to talk about Popsy first for the sheer fact that it was in fact published first. So there was a collection that King contributed to in 1987 called Masks, but spelling it like M-A-S-Q-U-E-S. I'm not sure if that's like more of a British spelling, because you know they do spell certain words in like the proper old English differently. And I think spelling it that way, it does actually have a little bit more of a scarier connotation for some reason. I don't know, but this was the second Masks collection, and it was subtitled All New Stories of Horror and the Supernatural, and they were all very short stories, like very, very short. So nothing like the Night Flier, which borders close to like novella in size. This story is only 13 pages, at least in the collected version here. I don't have the original. Maybe that's something that I will start to finally try to do, that Nick Oakes has kind of sent me on a tangent towards with his amazing gift that I have to thank that dude once again for. Love you, man. You're super awesome, and I love sharing palaver with you about music and King and all of those other creative things that you and I like to frequently discuss and stuff like that. So shout out once again to him. If you want to see me unboxing some very cool collected gift kind of stuff that he sent me, where I got the original printing of The Mist, and then also The Dark Tower. You can see that on the previous Hail to Stephen King video where I was talking about Pet Sematari's upcoming film, which you can see our thoughts about that trailer. Mine were mixed, as were Cecil's, but I'm still very, very much looking forward to it. But I digress. So Popsy, originally published in '87 in this collection, along with stories by Richard Matheson, Robert Bloch, and many, many more. You know, those are two of King's heroes. So I'm sure it was pretty dope for him in the '80s to just start to find himself like in these like big, huge, like smorgasbord of scarific shizzle. And so yes, that's one that I might try to track down, because I really, really dig this story. It's short, sweet, scary, awesome, and it's about this guy named Sheridan who is a gambler, but very specifically, he's like, he loves playing cards, man, just like a certain lady I know. And he got himself into some debt, like some serious debt. We're not talking $70, we're not talking $700 or $7,000, we're talking $17,000 in debt. You know, and he even mentions at one particular point in the story, he's like, it's good when, you know, you just lose immediately because, you know, you get discouraged and you dip out, you're like, it's just not my night, you know, I'm not chasing anything. But it's when you win initially that you start to, you know, when you start to lose, you think, you know, the wheel of cause is eventually going to come back around, and you're just gonna, you know, the luck is eventually gonna, you know, pick back up, and you're gonna just get right back into it. And on that particular streak, or lack thereof, that's where he found himself in this massive debt, you know, with these very, very shady mobster type people. And he gets referred by the guy that he owes money to an associate of sorts, a foreign guy who goes by the very dubious title of Mr. Wizard. And what Sheridan is basically doing for this guy, it's horrible. Absolutely horrible. He's abducting children, and he is handing them over to this Mr. Wizard guy, a guy who is dealing in you know, just the trafficking of children, named Mr. Wizard. Turns my stomach beyond belief. Y'all who are parents, I personally, thankfully, not being a parent, I've dodged a couple bullets, but I do not have any children. And perhaps I thought things would be different in my 30s, but I'm very glad that that is not the case, in all honesty, because, you know, career-wise, I still have so much that I am in the midst of trying to get in place and accomplish and everything. But I'm sure that this story, especially thinking of like Rachel in the Facebook group who commented on it because she read it, I can see this hitting close to home. It's almost like my little brother recently told me that, which next month I should announce is going to be our book of the month is going to be Pet Sematary. And he was like, dude, I remember seeing the movie, and, you know, I found it unsettling, but I guess he recently did the Michael C. Hall audiobook because he's a assistant soccer coach in Georgia. And so he's like, yeah, driving the bus around with the kids and stuff, and, you know, I've got the audiobook going, and he said that he loved it, loved it, loved it. I cannot recommend it enough if you want to do the reread that way. It's really terrific. And or just, you know, read it proper, or do both. I like to do both. You know, it's fun to juggle, because then you can sit and you can read, and then you can continue along with the story at your leisure, you know, once you get back home or you're done doing the dishes or the yard work or whatever. But he said, dude, that story hits so much more close to home now that I have a son. And I would imagine this story of Popsy does the very same thing. So Sheridan's hanging out in a mall parking lot in some shady-ass van of his, and he spots this kid. And this kid, you know, wearing his Pittsburgh Penguins shirt and everything, looks very pale and sickly and just nervous and confused. And he's like, right before the taking right here. And so he goes and he's like, hey, you look like you're lost, blah, 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 blah. And, you know, the kid is like, yes, I'm looking for my Popsy. And I should note that I both read this, because it's only 13 pages, you know, but I also took the time to listen to the audiobook. It was like maybe 25, 30 minutes, something like that. Interestingly enough, read by Mr. Joe Mantegna. I'm not sure. This is an Italian dude that you've seen. He's been on Criminal Minds for like forever. But he also voices Fat Tony on The Simpsons, so you will very distinctively recognize the voice of this audiobook narrator. He was also in The Godfather 3, Forget Paris. He's been in tons of stuff, both TV and film. But he does a great job narrating this audiobook, I must say, and he adds the whole mobster, you know, kind of, you know, just shady perspective of this person, this Sheridan guy. But, so he lures the kid into his van, you know, it's like the South Park episode where he's like, now can you learn to trust people, son? Now get in my van. And it's, that's a terrific South Park episode. You know, I think it's Tweak that he does that too. But, long story short, gets him in the van, and then all of a sudden, stuff gets crazy once this kid realizes that he is about to be abducted, and Sheridan's like, yeah, I saw your Popsy, he went over to the McDonald's, and you know, the kid is like, why would he go there, you know, and you start to realize that, especially after this pale looking kid bites him and has these big fangs and stuff like that, and starts saying that his Popsy can fly and he can sense, you know, where he is and that he's gonna find you and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, you know that this is probably not gonna end well for Sheridan, man. And it's short, it's sweet, you know, sweet like the blood of virgins, or whatever you want to say. And it's a great vampire story. You guys have seen me in Sweet, and I'm a dampier in my band, Chiron. And so, yeah, you can probably imagine that even though this is a very brief and quick read for Sai King, that I would recommend the hell out of this one. It is super cool. I love the ending. It's well paced, it's informative, it's cool, and it's creepy. Genuinely creepy. So, main reason that I wanted to pair Popsy with this next story, which is significantly longer, it's almost 40 pages in comparison, the Night Flier. Night Flier is also about a vampire, or is it? So, originally published in 1988 and collected in Prime Evil, New Stories by the Masters of Modern Horror. This was a collection that, besides King, also had his longtime buddy Peter Straub, who he collaborated with on Black House and on The Talisman, which is one of my absolute favorite Sai King books. You know, Clive Barker was also in this collection, and tons of other noteworthy names and stuff like that. But this one follows a shade-tastic dude. He is shady as the day is long. He's a scumbag, man, genuinely, and I always like when King writes from the perspective of people like this. I find it, I don't know, like morbidly fascinating to some degree. Guy's name is Richard Dees, and he works for a publication, one of those like tabloids, you know, like the ones that would put all the flying saucers and stuff about Bat Boy and things like that. It's called Inside View, and this is actually a very cool story in the fact that this ties in with the bigger King universe, going as far back as the Dead Zone, because this guy was in the Dead Zone when Johnny Smith was kind of getting slightly notorious for, you know, his powers of, you know, of like foresight and stuff like that, and, you know, helping, you know, like on the way to helping solve murders and all of these different things. Richard Dees is a character in that book. He's not in very long, but he wanted to basically bring Johnny Smith onto the publication to put together fake stories and just give validation about them actually being real because of his alleged powers and stuff like that. So it's really fun to get a story that expands on this guy and just the type of work that he does. And Inside View pops up in a ton of other Sai King books, at least in just like brief mention and stuff like that. It's in Desperation, Insomnia, Bag of Bones, Needful Things, Dr. Sleep. I mean, so it basically, this publication factors into the greater King universe, which is really cool. And yeah, this guy is hot on the trail of somebody who he presumes to be a serial killer, who is basically going from like these small little podunk like airport stops and killing people. And he's like, okay, we have a serial killer on our hands, and not only are they a serial killer, but they're like draining people's blood. And this person obviously thinks that they're a vampire, which is just a fascinating perspective for a serial killer. It's stuff we've seen done, you know, before, but King does it fascinatingly because this New York tabloid journalist basically is also a pilot himself. And so he's going around in his little, you know, pond jumper, whatever plane, and he is hot on the trail of this guy who is doing much the same. And he's like, man, that thing is so small in like the luggage area. Like you could only fit a couple suitcases down there, but is this guy potentially sleeping in there, like coffin status during the day? The title also, The Night Flier, coming from the fact that this guy who he's on the trail of only travels at night, you know, obviously, because if he is a vampire, he would travel at night, you know, he wouldn't be able to, you know, fly in the sunlight or anything like that. So, yeah, he is essentially going and investigating and talking with different people at these small little places, you know, just trying to, you know, rouse up information, but the end game is him trying to get photos of this person and just write this sensationalist story that, you know, all the schlubs, you know, going through the 7-Eleven checkout when they're getting their beer and their Twinkies are just gonna gobble up, just like, you know, the Night Flier would gobble up his victims and everything. And the King rates this guy as perfect sleaze, you know. He's very fascinating, and just some of the things that he says, especially just some of the references he makes about, you know, tight virgin coups and just all this terrible stuff. The guy is just as slime as they get. He's a piece of shit, man, and but yet he is a compelling just person to be leading the proceedings here in the story. And so without really wanting to spoil anything, he eventually catches up to him. And if you're familiar with the movie, should I say if he's a vampire or not? I don't know, but the guy's pissing blood when he finally catches up with him in this bathroom at this larger international airport in North Carolina, you know, as he's been chasing him since Maine. You know, that's one of the first places he goes to. And so it's a great story. I love this story. It was adapted in 1997 by HBO Home Video into a feature film where they did it very faithfully, with the exception of they added a rival journalist, this chick that Dees is kind of butting heads with and kind of chasing the story at the same time of, and it's like a rival of his, this lady. And they also alter the climax just a little bit, despite being very faithful. And I love this movie, man. Just finally tracked it down. It's long out of print, so you might have to spend more than you would like to for a used DVD. It's never seen any high definition release in Blu-ray or 4K or anything like that, but boy would I love to see one, you know. Home video and then DVD, and DVD being the one that I tracked down. But, you know, Mr. Miguel Ferrer is awesome in this. He has often played slime characters like this, and so for that reason, he kills it, man. He really does. He does a tremendous job. He's been in so many things, from like Deep Star 6 to RoboCop, and he often plays these type of, you know, just deplorable people with no moral fiber. And so for that reason, he was also in a lot of Tales from the Crypt episodes, now that I think about it, like 2 or 3 of them if I'm not mistaken. And so yeah, this character is just perfect for him, and he knocks it out of the park. He is the best part about it. I know a lot of people were critical of this when it initially came out. They said it was one of the weaker Stephen King adaptations, but I disagree. If anything, for the fact that his performance is so good and he embodies this character so well. And yeah, I mean, that was actually one of the only things that even critics who trashed on this movie said was really good. So I don't even think it's streaming anywhere. So you can't even jump and VOD it on you know, YouTube or Amazon Prime or anything like that. You can't drop your $4 and even stream it, which kind of sucks. But I highly recommend seeking it out. That 1997 film is awesome. And then even more intriguing is the bit that I was unaware of, that while I was doing some research, I figured out. And apparently, there is a British writer by the name of Kim Newman, who did this series called Anno Dracula, and it started out in 1992 with a release that had a few novellas and some short stories, one of which was called You're the Wind Beneath My Wings, which obviously makes me want to start singing that Bette Midler song and laugh my ass off. But You're the Wind Beneath My Wings is this story that apparently has the Night Flier in it, okay? It has the flippin' Night Flier in it, and the Night Flier, of all things, pairs together with Rainbird from Firestarter, and they're both working for the shop, and they go on some covert mission or something like that. Crazy, right? Yeah. Anno Dracula, though, the name is taken from the original Dracula story and everything, and the really rad thing, besides the fact that I want to track this down, is that it dwells in this alternate history of sorts where, as opposed to being defeated by Van Helsing and his peeps, Dracula won. Dracula, succeeded, took over Britain, and it's an alternate reality of sorts where vampires are out in the open, and they don't quite rule the world, some of them are decent parts of society or whatever, but they're out in the open, and they really exist. And so this guy's a Bram Stoker winner, and he's published a ton of stuff and much more within this series, and they're all kind of anthology type storytelling about vampires, and I am so going to track down some Kim Newman. So if any of y'all are familiar with him, please in the comments below give me some information if you've read any of his stuff, because I want to read this story. If it's got Rainbird and the Night Flier together, absolutely awesome. And the little connective tissue, just as we're wrapping things up here that I have to make mention of, is the fact that the Night Flier is presumably the Popsy that that kid is talking about, and King just spells it out, in the afterwards. So that's pretty dope, and yeah, you can see why I paired these stories together, I would imagine. So I have to extend the grande gracias. I'm about to go play a show with my band Chiron, so this might be a slightly shorter video, but I hit all the points that I wanted to. More so than anything, you need to read these two stories because they are absolutely awesome. I'm a big fan of both, especially since, I'm a big fan of finers and all that stuff. So I have been Jaime and Fuego. You can find me on all social media sectors like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and the YouTubes with all my old and Fuegotainment content ahead of new things coming very soon. Subscribe to the horror show here. Porfa y gracias, we greatly appreciate it. We do 2 to 3 episodes a day. Ring the bell so you get notifications about all of those, including every Terrifying Tuesday and Scarific Saturday when I do this program, Hail to Stephen King. Don't forget, if you want to have further palaver, ask to join the Hail to Stephen King group on Facebook. I am the sole admin, so I decide everybody who comes in. All that I ask is that we keep the discussion purely to El Rey, but from there on out, we talk about what all of us are reading at the time. We post pictures of our book collections, memes, funny stories, anytime King news breaks, I always jump right on there with it. I actually just bought hailtostephenking.com, so there may be some very exciting, grander things that I'm envisioning. You all have to stay tuned so I can inform you further about that. But yes, I guess that covers all bases, y'all. So until the Wheel of Kizah comes around, no, not to get confused with Kazaa, who I used to download all kinds of illicit content through, like Bad Religion albums and whatnot back in the early 2000s. I say, hasta luego, sin amigos. Thankee. I hope it is sooner rather than later that we get to reconnect. And until that instance transpires, remember, stay scared. And read Stephen King's Nightmares and Dreamscapes, because I'm going to announce on Monday on the Hail to Stephen King group what our next 2 stories are. So stay tuned.